most of the state is doing over that number. There are a lot of areas of the state that would like to see everything set back to the, sometime in the 90s even, because they did a lot of conservation in the 70s and 80s. Everybody's got a story to tell, and they're going to have to tell their story, and that's the difficulty of trying to manage the whole diverse state of California from the Water Board. And so we would encourage the emergency measure going forward to be as simple as possible, again, staying the course on reporting and not changing the baseline. So I just wanted to underscore that. The other point I wanted to make was the need for polling and research to understand why people are doing what they do. We really can't use data to stretch ourselves into the realm of trying to figure out behavior very comfortably. We can maybe get some trends and then maybe make some educated guesses. And I think some of the water agencies have a better understanding of their customer base and can probably tell the story a little bit more accurately for their customer base, having seen the trends over long periods of time. But this data has been collected for just a number of months. And again, trying to manage off of the weather and off of the monthly data, and then trying to figure out behavior based on just some very limited data for the whole state of California, for the entire customer base of the state of California, I think is treacherous territory. So I would just encourage us all, again, to stay the course, collect the information, continue to manage, continue to message on the drought. I think it's clear to most Californians that we are in the drought. We had some good polling come out on that recently as well, that most believe that we need to do better on storage, on managing our groundwater resources, on managing our water resources in general, and that this is an opportunity going forward. But this is also it's recognized that this is an unprecedented drought period that we're in, and I think in general we're doing the right thing in terms of messaging statewide. We can continue to stay the course again on implementation, focusing on outdoor irrigation. I think, again, some of these numbers do continue to underscore that hypothesis that most people have, that we could do better on outdoor irrigation. And so we're looking forward to continuing to partner with the Water Board and on the 17th for continuing the emergency order for the next year.
And thanks, as always, for all of your great support working with DWR on SWRCB.com, which is a great resource.
Thank you. Thank you for that plug. I should have done it. I didn't. Jennifer's going to have my hide.
I just thought I'd say it again. We've got to say it as many times.
SaveOurWater.com. Go there. One other thing I did want to say, water wasters 1-800 number. I guess one thing that just occurred to me was, if you don't know who your water purveyor is, look at your water bill. You pay this water bill every month or every other month, and if you see a person down the street flooding their gutters, or you want to rat them out, probably the best person to call, rather than the State Water Board, would be, and I'm not discouraging, if you guys want to field those calls, that's great, but I would encourage, and this is for the audience, I would encourage folks, if they want to be concerned about their local neighbors and their water use, call your water agency to whom you pay your bill, and their phone number is on the water bill. Thanks.
That's good. There's also the tool on the website about Find Your Water Agency, right? Yeah, whether it's Aqua or through our website, I believe.
Yeah, we do have that tool. I would just say, part of the motivation here is that, people may observe water waste when they're not in their home or where they live, and there are definitely parts of the state, particularly parts of Southern California, where one block to the next, the water purveyor is different. There are cities
We've
where
got 86 cities.
That's right.
Yeah, and probably 300 water purveyors. Right, exactly. Just go to Maywood. Yes. For example.
Could I just respond to that? I thought about that too, and my sense is that our water agencies would gladly tell the local water agency they have a water waster in their jurisdiction. So all you have to do is get the address, the street address, and call your water agency and tell them where you see the water waste.
You should also be calling your media outlet. Really
and taking a picture with your iPhone and posting it.
Right.
Thanks. Twittering it.
We fielded a lot of calls. I don't want to prolong this. We fielded a lot of calls last summer from people who, for whatever reason, hadn't called their water agency or had and felt they hadn't gotten an adequate response.
Well, no, I've heard the lack of adequate response in some places. Now, Bob Gore with the Gualco Group.
Good morning. It was a wonderful staff report, and we thoroughly endorsed the aqua approach. We'd also like to remind the staff that irrigation districts are historical and good stewards who favor a contextual approach that's inclusive, broad, and representative that recognizes and respects local expertise. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll now take a 15 break, and then we will be back to our remaining agenda items. Thanks very much. Okay. Janine, ready to roll? I like that graphic. All right, we are resuming at 11:25, and we're moving on to item number 7. Hello. Hello.
Good morning, Chair Marcus, members of the board. My name is Karen Larson. I am Assistant Deputy Director of the Division of Drinking Water here at the State Water Board. And I am going to present to you a flyover view of our major categories of comments that we received on the Safe Drinking Water Plan and how we addressed those. I will talk a little bit about ones that you don't fit within the major categories, both ones that we did address and ones that we haven't addressed. So as a quick, let's see, make sure I'm on board here. Perfect. Quick reminder, the Safe Drinking Water Plan is an assessment of the overall quality of the state's drinking water. We identified specific water quality problems in the state and presented an analysis of the known and potential health risks associated with drinking water contamination, and included a number of specific recommendations to improve drinking water quality, 34 in total, I believe, once we added a couple more. We issued a draft, or released a draft, of the Safe Drinking Water Plan back in October, and that initiated a public comment period, as well as we went around the state and conducted 6 workshops to get verbal input from stakeholders. We received 25 formal written comment letters that we reviewed thoroughly and identified the major comments that we thought were most appropriate to address. And today, it's an opportunity for us to give you an overview of those comments and the revisions to the plan. I just want to make it clear that we didn't remove any of the recommendations that we made in the draft plan, and in fact, added a couple based on comments. In addition, we have made some refinements to the recommendations to be more clear, but we didn't, I would say, water them down in any way. In fact, we've probably strengthened some of them in some ways. Let's see, what else? All right, well, why don't we just launch into the major comments. So the first category is about consolidation. We got a number of comments from stakeholders who were concerned that we were recommending that we mandate consolidation everywhere, no matter what, without any consideration for the special circumstances, which of course exist everywhere. So we agreed with the comment and added some text to make it clear that we were looking at recommending consolidation where it was feasible and where it was appropriate, where there were systems that were either unsustainable or were not meeting drinking water standards. So focusing on places where there were problems, not just consolidation for the sake of consolidation. We also added to the text, as well as the relevant recommendation, all of the barriers associated with consolidation, from things legal, financial barriers, willingness to consolidate, let's see, liability issues associated with a large system taking on a small system that's not meeting drinking water standards, those kinds of things. So we clarified the recommendation and the text in that manner. The next section is on disadvantaged communities and sustainability. And this section was rather vague, and the text, as well as the recommendation, really referred to the fact that we need both a governance structure as well as funding for disadvantaged communities that are not sustainable or don't have the technical, managerial, financial capacity to continue to maintain their water system. So
that's true of public water systems we regulate and ones we don't, right? Both.
I'm sorry, what's true of them? This recommendation in particular?
That challenge
Yes.
transcends
That's
both
correct.
categories.
That's correct.
Or spans both categories.
And so what we did was, since the draft plan was released in October, the governor's budget was released in January, and the A pages of the governor's budget included some reference to affordable, safe drinking water in disadvantaged communities. And that's where we were trying to get to with this recommendation, both operations and maintenance funding, which is something we don't currently have funding for in our Prop 1 and other grant programs, and a governance structure for dealing with these disadvantaged communities and the places where they're unsustainable. So we mirrored in the text and in our recommendation what was stated in the governor's A pages in the revised plan. We may want to revise it further to flesh out additional initiatives as they become fleshed out at the governor's office and in the budget process. The next section is just on the scope of the Safe Drinking Water Plan. I think this is what you were also referring to, Chair Marcus, which is we got a number of comments that our scope was limited to public water systems, and shouldn't we, now that we have the human right to water passed by the legislature in 2013, expand our scope to include very small water systems, whether that be domestic wells or small systems that are under our regulatory authority, under the size that we have the authority to regulate. So less than 15 connections, generally. That's a general statement. There are some cases where we should be regulating less than 15 connections. So we included in the plan a recognition that there are major problems in that area of the state, in that domestic wells are running out of water. They have water quality problems just like public water systems do. And so we acknowledged that, yes, the human right to water does not just relate to consumers that get their water from a public water system, but that in order for us to expand the plan in a future iteration of the plan, we would need new and expanded authority from the legislature. We would also need significantly more resources and a commitment and involvement of other local, state, and agency partners. So we included that in the text. We don't have a recommendation along those lines, but wanted to recognize that, yes, there are problems, and yes, we need to figure out ways to fix them. The next section I really think was kind of motherhood and apple pie in some ways. I mean, it makes a lot of sense now that the Division of Drinking Water is with the, as part of the water boards. It's an opportunity for us to look at how we can better coordinate among the divisions that, but whether that be Division of Water Rights, which we've already had some success in coordinating with water rights in the 8 months that we've been with the water boards, or Division of Water Quality, to better or enhance our coordination for the purposes of improving source water protection activities in the state. So we added a section on source water protection. We talked about not only what we'd like to be doing, but also things that are already happening. For example, we're working with Division of Water Quality to provide information about public water systems in the vicinity of injection wells in Kern County in particular right now. We also work with the regional boards on identifying public water supplies that are impacted by discharges, and work with them to figure out how to identify the responsible party and mitigate the contamination. So there's a lot already going on, but I think there's an opportunity to improve that collaboration among our divisions. And so we acknowledge that in the revision to the plan. We also got a number of comments from stakeholders requesting that we add a recommendation to expand the use of point of use or point of entry treatment devices by public water systems for the purposes of complying with drinking water standards. And we had some discussion of POU and POE already in the plan, and so we felt that it made sense for us to include a recommendation to enact legislation to allow the expanded use. Right now, one of the barriers to expanding the use is the time limit, 3-year time limit in statute for using POU or POE for complying with standards. So we included that recommendation as well. And finally, we got a lot of comments about our local primacy program. So local primacy agencies are counties to which we delegate the authority to enforce the Safe Drinking Water Act for systems that are less than 200 service connections. We have 30 LPAs in the state, and we gave very little lip service to our LPA program in our original draft. And so we thought that it made a lot of sense for us to expand the discussion of how our LPA program is doing and what kinds of things we think need to be done in order to improve that program. And so we talk about the various challenges that LPAs face, just like any other small county running a program. They're pulled in all kinds of directions and aren't necessarily focused every day of the week on drinking water. Revisions to delegation agreements and increased expectations in terms of their regulation of public water systems. And what we did was we added a recommendation to use our annual evaluation of our program to identify where we can improve. And also, I think Board Member Doduck will like this. We added that we will be using our performance report not only to report out on our metrics, but also our LPAs. So look for that in September when the new performance report comes out.
My birthday month.
All right, we'll put a bow on it for you.
Only you would want a performance report for your birthday.
All right, before I move on to comments not addressed, I wanted to point out that there were a number of comments that didn't fit well within our major categories that we did address. So for example, we got a lot of comments about when we were identifying possible funding sources for disadvantaged communities. We had a few that we identified. We changed one of them from a water use fee to a water use tax in the recommendation, as well as adding some language that indicated that that's not necessarily the universe of possible funding sources, that we need to explore all possible funding sources. Another is we got a lot of excellent, very specific comments from the California Water Association clarifying how the PUC regulates investor-owned utilities. We ran that by the PUC and incorporated nearly all of those changes. It really improved the discussion in that area. We also updated the text to acknowledge that both Prop 1 and the Groundwater Management Act has been passed, so we added some text along those lines. And we are working on, as we speak actually, including clearer timelines as well as metrics for success in our implementation plan, in particular the appendix that includes the table with the timelines. So that'll be included in the final plan once we release it. So as far as comments that we didn't address, I would categorize them into sort of 3 areas. First is some were just out of scope of the plan, not that they were bad recommendations, they were just not discussed in any way in the text, and so they would be completely out of context had we tried to add them. So there were things like really big, overarching, why don't you develop a statewide drinking water strategic plan, which is a great idea. I'm a big fan of strategic planning. So, that may be something that we want to consider sometime in the future. Others were more related to water supply, for example. As you know, we're working on looking at expanding recycled water use in the state, and we have a couple of activities around looking at expanding recycled water, not just groundwater recharge, but surface water augmentation, as well as the feasibility, possibly in the future, of direct potable reuse. And so there were some comments about fast-tracking those processes and fast-tracking the permitting process. I don't disagree with those comments, but it's not within the scope of the current plan. We may want to expand it in the future to include those things, but we didn't include every last task that the division is doing in the plan. Similarly, there was a comment to include a recommendation to list waters as impaired for flow. That again is a supply issue. This plan is more focused on drinking water quality and how we address water quality issues, so we didn't include that in the plan. And there were a number of others that just didn't fit within the scope of the plan. Then there were things that were included in comments that we already do. And so, for example, considering harmful algal blooms in the permitting process for desalination. Of course, that's something that we already assess as an issue of a new source that we would be permitting. So we didn't include a specific recommendation along those lines. We already require the consideration of metering when somebody comes to us for funding. So that's another that was recommended. We didn't include specifically in the plan. And we already require electronic submittal of water quality data from the labs that do the analyses for drinking water systems, and we make it available to the public. So that's another one that we didn't specifically address. And then there was a category of comments that would have required either data that we don't have or didn't ask for in our rate, what was the word I'm looking for? Our rate survey. Or that it would require significantly more analysis. And as you know, prior to the division coming to the water boards, a team of retired annuitants basically spent 3 years doing the analysis that you see in the plan. And so for us to we could spend another year working on this, or 2 years refining it with more analysis, and we probably will be over the next few years. But for now, this is what we have, and this is what we're doing.
Kind of a thing.
I'm sorry?
That was the perfect being the enemy of the good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So some examples are that we should quantify the number of Californians lacking or at risk of losing access to safe, affordable drinking water. There are some efforts along those lines, but that is a huge data gap that we have, especially when we're talking about domestic wells and very small systems. Analyzing the cost to consumers, taking into account the amount they use. That's the reference to our rate survey. We just simply didn't ask for that information, and so don't have the data in front of us. Another is the cost of compliance with our new Chrome 6 MCL. As you know, this predated our Chrome 6 MCL being adopted, and so it's not included specifically in the plan now, but obviously will need to be included in a future iteration. All right, so just to give a quick overview of our next steps, I already mentioned we had the workshops and our comment period. We're here today to give you the overview of the comments we received, and our plan is to issue a revised plan by March 15th. That will be the draft as we see it today. Then there will be some review by agency and the governor's office, and our goal is to meet the deadline of June 15th to submit it to the legislature. We're not soliciting additional comments from stakeholders on this next draft, although we are certainly welcome any discussions with stakeholders as to how we could improve the plan in the future, and obviously we'll attempt to meet a goal of revising it and having a new plan in the 5-year deadline that's in statute. So let's see, what else? And I guess that's it.
That's great.
Any questions?
Very good. Go.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your efforts to pull this together. I just think it's a wonderful, comprehensive reference for anyone who's interested in the drinking water statistics and challenges in our state. And so I want to congratulate you on this accomplishment to date, and also on the responsiveness to the input you've received. I'm interested, on just one particular area is the point of use, point of entry question. In January we approved the funding for what feels to me like an experimental yet promising venture looking into getting a little outside of the box of our idea of water utilities and distribution systems, but looking at technology to try to ensure safe drinking water for the right use, at the tap versus other uses that might not require strict drinking water standards being met. Do you see, I realize we're at the point where and it feels to me like, and you can answer this, but that's in a strategic planning kind of framework right now, as opposed to actually making commitments at this time in our drinking water plan to say, oh, that's the solution, that should be implemented in these areas that are outside of utility boundaries, have water quality issues, and need something better than bottled drinking water being delivered.
Yeah, so I'll answer that in 2 ways. First is that we don't have to wait for legislation in order for us to permit a POU/POE solution for a public water system. We can do that now on a case-by-case basis. The other way that I'll answer it is that the answer is on a case-by-case basis. It's public water system by public water system, what's cost effective, what's doable. There are examples in Arizona where they've tried on a bigger scale to use POU/POE, and the maintenance just proved to be way too much. So it's definitely on a case-by-case basis whether that is a solution that's going to be sustainable. And I think the pilot projects that we're entering into will help us answer that question as to how doable is it and at what scale.
And right, and then there's a governance component, so that we're not creating new little utilities, but we're actually partnering with larger TMF, capable utilities that hopefully can reach out. We provide some incentives to enable those partnerships.
Yeah.
Good.
So let me just interrupt. I forgot to introduce my staff. This is Nick Shudo. He is on my staff, and he's been doing all of the heavy lifting with all of the revisions and helping with the workshops, and so he can answer some specifics as well.
Just one more thing. A common question I get is, does the state have an idea of how many people rely on, domestic wells and that sort of thing that are less than 15 connections? So do we have a sense of the population of Californians? And you don't have to answer it now, but I just wanted, because that's one of those analyses I think maybe you were, it's not at our fingertips. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Well, I think we're getting more information as people are running out of water. We're getting to know where those places are every day, and I bet we'll get a lot more this coming year. But it is a huge data gap, and some people simply don't want you to know that they are on a domestic well. So it's a data issue.
Other questions? We have a few speaker cards. Thank you. Very nicely done. First, Laurel Firestone from the Community Water Center. Thank you for being with us all day, Laurel. Appreciate that. Like the company.
Thank you.
Yeah, morning.
So we are excited. I will say thank you to staff and the board for leadership on this, and we really appreciate how proactive staff has been in reaching out to stakeholders and getting feedback. We're really impressed with the recommendations in here, and we're excited to help work on implementation. Wanted to use this time to reiterate some of the implementation that we want to see happening. Certainly continuation. We need continuation of the interim solutions and emergency drought funding that we're concerned about. We've been discussing with the legislature as well, concern around not seeing that forthcoming, to re-upping some of the emergency and interim solutions in terms of the amount of funding that was made available last year. We see this only increasing in its intensity in the drought, and we expect this summer to be really bad, and it would be really great to make sure that we're ahead of the curve and making sure we have the resources. This board did a really excellent job of getting the money out to communities that needed it, and was able to spend that in the past year, and we need more because there's a lot more need and we need to get ahead of it. We also have a real opportunity with Prop 1 and particularly the technical assistance money to make sure that the bond money that is there can be used to really promote sustainable solutions like consistent with the recommendations in this report. The drinking water program has just released a great newsletter around small systems, drinking water and wastewater, which is excellent. There's a lot of great movement towards really focusing in on that need and specialization and interface there. We would like to see more. We'd like to see really what we're calling an office of small disadvantaged communities, or sustainable water solutions that can be more proactive. I think there's a lot more resources and staffing that we would like to see go towards that, as well as the data that could help answer questions like where are there communities that are on state smalls or private wells that really are in the purview of this board. There is, I will say, there's definitely a lot that this board can't do without legislative authority, but there's a lot that this board can do with its current authority to help communities on small systems or state smalls and private wells. And one of that is being able to better use the data that you and the Drinking Water Indicator and Colin Virus Screen has developed, and integrate that in with the resources, looking at the guidelines you have with the resources you have, and making sure that it's eligible for systems that are on state smalls or private wells outside of public water systems. So that's only becoming more and more of an urgent public health need. It's something that ultimately, the state's drinking water funding is looked to as kind of the only source of funding out there, and so it would be good to more proactively integrate that into the work of the board with its Safe Drinking Water Plan. And then, we wanted to just reiterate thank the board in this report for highlighting the need for real sustainable funding, and particularly O&M funding. And I think this board has been consistent in highlighting that need and suggesting some alternatives. We really hope that there's a real push for making that a reality and really making some progress in the very near future to make sure that we can meet those funding needs. And the bond is amazing, and it's a huge opportunity, but it's going to get us one piece of it, and it's going to get us so far. Right. And we can't put in solutions that we can't afford to maintain. And so it's important to be looking at how we can have more sustainable funding sources. So look forward to working with the board to implement that.
Thank you. We do too. That's going to, as you know, we keep telling the legislature there are public policy decisions to be made to implement the human right to water that they're going to have to make. So, forward to that conversation. Thank you. Phoebe Seaton, Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability.
Hi, thanks so much. I want to reiterate what I said before and what Laurel just said about the incredible outreach and work that went into this report, from the authorship to the outreach and to the interaction with community members and stakeholders. Really a model to be followed. I'm wondering, is there any way you can go back in the presentation to the consolidation thing? I wanted to, I think, especially highlight that we're really hoping that a lot of the recommendations from this report can support sort of all of our collective efforts this year and next through the legislative process and administrative process. I think there's really incredibly kind of far-reaching and strong recommendations that we'd like to see This is the first time I've seen this, and I kind of looked at it and said, well, I should probably pay more attention to that. And I know that you're dealing with a lot of kind of countervailing kind of issues and opinions on this issue, which is a really important issue, and a lot of us responded with comments. The only issue was 3. I was a little concerned that might be too much of a barrier, that if that were a condition of a consolidation, it might make sense to look beyond a sphere of influence or on the border of a sphere of influence. I know this is a really specific point, but what we have unfortunately seen is some districts and cities reshaping their spheres to cut out disadvantaged communities, and would like to avoid that incentive.
The sphere of influence is a term of art.
It is. It's a growth boundary, and so that is just one issue. Again, we really look forward to seeing this report and working together on implementation. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I mean, thank you and Ms. Firestone for the kind words for our staff. The partnership with you all has also been extraordinary. Thank you for helping us do our job. That's the ideal.
Sure. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's important. And the consolidation issue is one we are going to have all kinds of conversations about, just as the A pages. It's not just for what we say in a report. It's a lot of players to be engaged, follow up from the Drinking Water Task Force, figuring out how to deal with the legal and financial barriers that are there. So I really think it's the issue of the year for us to figure out together.
Excellent. I'm on board.
Great. Jack Hawks, California Water Association.
I'll try to make it through 10 seconds without coughing. My apologies in advance on that.
You were originally going to talk about a response to how I should feel, and then you crossed it out.
Yeah, because I figured I was going to start coughing, but I can still tell you about that anyway. I was going to say you should feel somewhat relieved by the slides that they showed. Anyway, I just want to second the previous 2 speakers with the staff. They were very receptive and responsive, and I'll give you a couple of specifics.
Thank you.
And this is beyond my own parochial issues with the Public Utilities Commission. We're gratified that the staff is editing that section. That'll be great. But I can't tell you how great it is when a staff person calls you up after you submit a comment letter and they tell you on the phone that they're reading from a sentence from page 3 of your comment letter, and they're telling you make a good point, we want to explore it further, et cetera. That's really what responsiveness is all about. I also want to speak to this consolidation. I was going to bring this slide back as well. Okay. We were opposed to the consolidation mandate in the plan for innumerable reasons. It is just fraught with peril, needless to say. And a lot of those 4 points up there are certainly a welcome sight. I agree on point number 3. We're going to have to work on the sphere of influence. The sphere of influence is something that a lot of mischief can be made at the local level. So we're going to have to watch we're going to have to scrutinize that point number 3 there. But the other 3 points were all recommendations that we had suggested that have to be considered in any kind of a consolidation mandate. And just listening to Karen, it looks like the mandate has been ratcheted down a little bit to a consolidation recommendation with consideration of these conditions. That is a welcome sign. I don't know, we may still be opposing it when we see it on March 15th, but I'm just looking at this. It looks like it's something we may be able to work with now. So I just wanted to reflect that.
No, thank you. And I think we look forward to working with you as well as the other groups just to figure this out. I mean, again, consolidation was a big issue in the task force, and we said we would talk about it more, and we need to be pulling everybody together because it is exceedingly complex.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I add to that too, Felicia?
Why, yeah.
In the text, we also refer to our transition advisory group as a venue for these discussions.
Which is appropriate.
I think Jack's on our transition advisory group, so.
And he's not bashful about talking at that either, so, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next is Colin Bailey from the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water. Thank you also for all of your good work over the months and years.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be back momentarily, but I was just prompted by my colleagues to pick up a point that perhaps was left out earlier. And that has to do with respect to the plan. I'm not familiar with whether or not there's a plan for adopting and progressing many of the standards that need to be put into place so that communities actually know what a safe level for drinking water is. And the comment from my colleague specifically was with respect to the MCL for 123 TC. And just not knowing that it is in fact in place has implications for communities of, first of all, knowing whether or not they're getting safe water, secondly, being able to avail themselves of the funding to be able to clean it up, and then thirdly, knowing to what level they actually need to clean it up in order for it to be safe. And so the idea, I think, would be to make sure that there is in this plan a plan for advancing those on an expedited, or at least a reasonable time frame.
The standards or the assistance?
I would say both, but yeah, most certainly the standards so that we actually know where the target is.
Right. That's the next one on deck.
It's in our priority list of regs that we need to get over the finish line.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. All helpful. Yep.
And I just want to thank Carol Brown from the CPUC, who is now working with the drinking water program at the PUC and is present here and is going to be present in the future for a lot of our